Good morning, dear students. In the last lecture, we were discussing about the structure and function of major ecosystems, in which we talked about forest ecosystem in detail. Today, we'll discuss about some more ecosystems in with respect to their structure and functional aspects. So let us start our today's lecture. I'll start with the desert ecosystem, and a brief introduction of desert ecosystem can be summarized as follows. A desert is a region that receives low or no rainfall. They are characterized by an average annual precipitation of less than 250 millimeter in a year. The deserts occupy about 17% of Earth's land surface. The deserts are characterized by hot days and cold nights, and deserts are also characterized by scattered vegetation and animals. The soil of deserts are usually either without organic matter or with very little amount of organic matter. Now, talking about the structure and function of a desert ecosystem. So, we know that uh, any ecosystem is composed of biotic and abiotic components. In a typical desert, the biotic components will include producers, consumers, and decomposers. The producers in a desert ecosystems are shrubs, bushes, grasses, and trees. The consumers in desert ecosystems are different types of insects, various varieties of reptiles, camel, birds, etc. And decomposers in a desert ecosystem are usually thermophilic bacteria. Thermophilic bacteria are those bacteria which can survive at very high temperature, and desert ecosystems are usually characterized by very high temperature during the daytime. So such type of bacteria can very easily uh, flourish in desert ecosystems. Apart from thermophilic bacteria, we may also have various varieties of fungi in a desert ecosystem. The abiotic components will include sand or soil with a poor organic matter, along with sunlight, wind, and water. These are all non-living components which can be found in a desert ecosystem. So that was the structure and function of a desert ecosystem. Now let us see some photographs of some of the uh, producers and consumers of a desert ecosystem. So you can see through this photograph on the top left, this picture reflects a desert in which you may see xeric plants, means xerophytic plants. Xerophytic plants are those plants which can survive in conditions with scarcity of water, high temperature, such as deserts. Then below you can see the images of camels, which are also uh, part of biotic component of deserts. Then we have spotted hyena, uh, also a consumer in a desert ecosystem. So that was all about desert ecosystems. Now we'll discuss about pond and lake ecosystems together. Lakes and ponds are also known as lantic systems. The ponds and lakes account for near about 3% of Earth's surface. The structure and function of ponds and lakes are determined by various factors such as turbulence, temperature, the clarity of water, habitat size, and water depth. The variation in these factors will also bring variation to the biotic components of the ponds and lake ecosystems, and that variation will reflect the variation in structure and function of different ponds and lakes. The world's largest freshwater lake based on area is Lake Superior of North America. The total area of this lake is 82,100 kilometers square, whereas the deepest lake is Baikal Lake of Asia. The maximum depth in this lake was observed as 1,741 meters, whereas the average depth is 730 meters. Now let's talk about the classification of lakes. The lakes can be classified on the basis of productivity. Productivity means the synthesis of chlorophyll content in the lake water. Now, based on the amount of chlorophyll in the water, the lakes can be classified into different categories. The first category is oligotrophic lakes. Such type of lakes are also called nutrient poor lakes, and they have low biological productivity and high transparency. The chlorophyll A content in the water of such lakes is usually less than 2 microgram per liter. Because the nutrient concentration is poor in such lakes, that's why the productivity will also decrease down. Producers will not be able to synthesize enough organic matter. As a result of that, chlorophyll A concentration in oligotrophic lakes are usually below 2 microgram per liter. Because the vegetation cover is not so dense, so we have high transparency in such oligotrophic lakes. Another category in the lakes is called mesotrophic lakes, which are the lakes which have moderate productivity. The chlorophyll A concentration in the water of such lakes is between 2 to 7 microgram per liter of chlorophyll A. The nutrient concentration is moderate, which results into a medium level of productivity. Because of that, the chlorophyll A concentration is higher than oligotrophic and lies between 2 to 7 microgram per liter. The third category of lakes on the basis of productivity can be termed as eutrophic lakes. As all of you know, we have also discussed this term as eutrophication in our previous lectures, which is reflected with high concentration of nutrients. So a eutrophic lake is a well-nourished lake. It is very productive because the concentration of nutrients is quite high. A balanced and diverse array of organisms can be seen in such eutrophic lakes. It has low transparency due to high algae and chlorophyll A content. The concentration of chlorophyll A in the water of eutrophic lakes varies between 7 to 30 microgram per liter. So this is the third category. The fourth category of lakes is known as hypereutrophic lakes. When the concentration of nutrient is in excess, then such lakes are called hypereutrophic lakes. Usually the chlorophyll A concentration in such lakes is above 30 microgram per liter. You can see algal blooms on the surface of such hypereutrophic lakes. The vegetative overgrowth can also be seen. The biodiversity of such eutrophic lakes are usually low. So on the basis of productivity, we can classify lakes into four categories: oligotrophic, mesotrophic, eutrophic, and hypereutrophic lakes. Now we'll talk about the thermal stratification in the lakes. If you get a chance to go around any lake, and if you get a chance to measure the temperature of any lake, you will find that as uh, you measure temperature from top surface to the bottom, you will find variation in the temperature, and that is called thermal stratification in the lakes. Thermal stratification is a phenomenon in which lakes develop two discrete layers of water of different temperature. As you move from top surface to the bottom in any lake, the temperature will vary. It will not be a constant temperature throughout the depth of lake. During summer season, as the temperature increases and wind subsides, the thermal stratification will start occurring very fastly in the lake water. During this time, the upper warm water layer will be formed. The temperature will be maximum on the upper layer of a lake, and this layer of the lake is known as epilimnion layer because of high temperature. And there will also be lower layer which will be the layer of cold water, and this layer is known as hypolimnion. It can easily be seen through this picture also. The epilimnion layer is the upper layer which has high temperature during summer season. Hypolimnion layer is the bottom layer which has low temperature during summer season. Both these layers are separated by a layer in between, which is also called intermediate layer, and it is named as thermocline layer. Thermocline layer will separate epilimnion layer and hypolimnion layer. The oxygen concentration in the hypolimnion layer tends to decrease compared to the apolimnion due to lack of water circulation. Because there is variation in the temperature, then water will not circulate very easily from top to bottom. So, and also the thermocline layer will separate both this apolimnion and hypolimnion layer. So usually the oxygen concentration will be more in the upper layer, that is apolimnion layer, because it is in direct contact with the atmospheric air, and atmospheric air will get diffused to the upper surface of lake water. Because of that, the oxygen concentration will be more in the upper layer, because there is no circulation of water from top to the bottom. So this oxygen will not reach to the bottom layer of lake, resulting into low oxygen concentration in hypolimnion layer. But during the winter season, thermal stratification process will inverse, means the upper layer, apolimnion layer, will be cold, means the temperature of this layer will be low compared to the hypolimnion layer's temperature, because during winter season the uh, air is cool compared to the water temperature, so it will also decrease down the temperature of water that is in direct contact with air. So this thermal stratification process will inverse or reverse during winter season. So that was how temperature varies in any lake from top to bottom, resulting into apolimnion, hypolimnion, and thermocline layers. Now let's see the structure and function of a pond ecosystem. As discussed before also, we will have biotic and abiotic components in the pond ecosystem. The biotic components can further be divided as producers, consumers, and decomposers. We have producers as floating plants. Many plants will be found in the pond ecosystem or lake ecosystem, which would be floating over the surface of water, such as Eichhornia crassipus, etc. Then we have suspended plants also. Those plants which will be having some aerial portion exposed to air and some portion immersed inside the water. So these plants are known as suspended plants. Then we have rooted plants, means those plants which are rooted at the bottom of pond. So the producers will be of three categories: floating plants, suspended plants, and rooted plants. And talking about the consumers, we'll have primary consumers, which are usually zooplanktons, which feed upon the phytoplanktons. Then we have secondary consumers in this category. We have frogs, fishes, and crabs. And finally, we have tertiary consumers, which are water birds and turtles. Uh, in the category of decomposers, we usually have different varieties of bacteria and fungi in pond ecosystem. Talking about the abiotic components, the major abiotic component in a pond ecosystem is water. All of us know this. Then we have gases which are dissolved in water. Then various kinds of nutrients which are also dissolved in the water and are available for all the biological organisms or living organisms living in that ecosystem. We have different kinds of minerals which will be dissolved in the water from the soil present uh, beneath the pond water. Then we have sunlight, which is also responsible for carrying out photosynthesis activity by aquatic plants. Then wind and soil will also form a part of abiotic components of pond ecosystem. So that was all about the structure and function of pond ecosystem. In the next lecture, we'll talk about our unit 2. So this topic was the last topic of our unit 1. So that was all about today. Thank you.